Hey guys, today we'll be doing the first real tutorial anyways, on Black Ops 3 GSC scripting. Today we're going to be focusing on functions and some basic variable stuff. So let's get started. Let's open up Launcher. Go to our map, open map folder, script ZM, and let's go to that ZM tutorial.gsc file, or in your case it might be called something different, whatever your map name is. And now I'm going to go into more detail on what this stuff actually is. So we're going to ignore this stuff at the top that starts with using or insert. This isn't really the scripting so much as the necessary things we have to put in to make our scripting work. So I'll go over this a little bit later. Here we have everything else, and everything else is inside a function. So functions are the base of all code. You need to have a function to put your code in. If you just start typing outside of the code, outside of the functions, this is going to cause an error. Everything has to be inside a function. So we could either start by adding to a function, such as function main over here, or we could create our own. For the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to create our own function. So to create a function, you simply type function and then the name of it. In this case, I'm going to call it say hello. It's important that there are no spaces in the name. You can use underscores though. I use underscores a lot. You have to have these parentheses after the function as well. And we'll go into more detail later that sometimes you actually put things inside of these parentheses. They're not just closed and open, they have a purpose. But for now, just leave them like that. And then a set of brackets. This is where all your code is going to go. It has to be below the open bracket and above the closed bracket. So in this function, we want to say hello. We want a line to print to the screen that just says hello. So the way we can do this is we can use an engine function. And as I talked earlier in the first tutorial, you can find all the engine functions on this website, the ModMe script docs. So if we go and search for print, we can find some print functions. I like to use iprintln bold, and it shows us here what this engine function does. Writes a bold line to the screen and gives us an example of how to use it. So let's take that and put it in our function. We can change that so it says hello. One important thing is that at the end of pretty much any line of code, you need to put a semicolon. This is so the computer knows where the end of a line is. Because computers don't actually read spaces or new lines. Like, if I wanted, I could put as many spaces as I want, and it would all be the same to a computer. It doesn't matter. I could also hit enter as many times as I wanted. Computer reads this the same. So the way we actually tell the computer that it's a new line is with the semicolon. Note that we don't always do this, and I'll bring up the exceptions later. One is obviously when we declare a function like this. We don't do that. We keep it no semicolons on that one. So we have a function and it says hello, but when we go in game, nothing is actually going to happen. That's because we haven't actually called this function. It's in the code, but we're not using it. So the way we can use it is by calling it from a function that's already running. In this case, function main of your mapname.gsc should always run at the start of your map. So whenever the map starts, it's going to run all this code and do all this Treyarch stuff regarding zones and some other basic things. But if we want, we can make it do more. In this case, we want it to run the say hello function. There's multiple ways to call a function. The most basic way would just be to type the name, parentheses, and because we're calling it, not declaring it, we put a semicolon. So what this is going to do is the computer is going to read down this function main like it does at the start of the map. Gonna go execute all this code. Then when it sees this line, it's going to jump to this function and print hello to the screen. And we can see that if I link the map. Or actually, hold on. We might not be able to see that. And the reason is not because it's not getting run, but because this is run as soon as the map is loading. And what is it? Oh, I haven't compiled this map. What was I saying? The reason we might not see this is because this code is run as soon as the map starts loading up. So the player has a black screen for a good amount of time while they're still loading into the game. So there's a chance this line could print so early that the player's screen is still black and it fades away before they even get to see it. So just to make sure that the player does see it, I'm going to put in a Waittils. So a Waittils, in this case, is going to wait till a certain event happens. And this is one Treyarch already has implemented, and it's called all players connected, semicolon. We have to have the level there, and I'll explain this a little bit later, but this has to do with it being the entire level. This Waittils based around the level and not something else. I'll talk about that a little later. Just know for now that having this line of code here, this Waittils all players connected, is going to halt this code until all players have connected into the game. And now another thing we can do is just add in a basic wait. So a wait is done like this. You type wait, parentheses, and then an amount in seconds you want the code to wait. In this case, this will wait 5 seconds. So what this means now is the computer is going to read these lines, execute this code. It's going to wait until all players are connected. Once that happens, it's going to wait 5 more seconds, and then it's going to do the say hello function. In fact, actually, if we want, we can do another print and say all players are connected, just so we can see when we load in when the script thinks we are all connected to the game. Alright, let's link this code. Hopefully it works this time. Okay, here we are. And as you can see, the hello is printed. We didn't actually see the all players connected print. And this is most likely because, like I was talking about before, the black screen still shows up for quite a bit, even after all players are connected, which is why I like to put, in general, a little wait after this wait till as well, because even when all players connect, there's still a black screen for a little bit. In fact, maybe we can just put like another wait in there. Okay, but yeah. So this is one way to call a function. The other way, which is pretty common, is using a thread. So the way you thread a function is you type the word thread before you type the function. So the difference between a thread and just calling it is a little difficult to explain, but once you get it, it makes sense. So in this case, we have to have something underneath this for it to actually make an impact. So let's put another print and just be like end of main function, because it's the bottom of the main function. And now we're going to change say hello a little bit. We're going to put a wait in it. We're going to wait 10 seconds. And then we're going to say hello again. Okay, so now when the difference between typing a function and threading it is when we thread it, the computer essentially splits off into two instances. So when we thread it, the computer is going to split off, and if you can imagine, like half of the computer is going to start reading the say hello function just like it did before, and the other half is going to keep going down. So it's going to read this print. And what this will do, in this case, how we have it set up right now, is when we thread this, when the computer gets to this, it's going to say hello and end of main function at virtually the same time. And then 10 seconds later, it's going to say hello again. If we didn't have the thread here, and we just had that, what the computer would do is it would, when it gets to this line, it would go over here, say hello, wait 10 seconds, say hello again, and then in virtually no time say end of main function. So you can see how threading it versus just calling it is different. And threads will become very useful later on. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about variables. So the way you declare a variable is basically you just write a word or something like say line to say, can't have any spaces between them, and then you do an equals sign and whatever the variable is equal to. So variables can be equal to different things. For one, they can be equal to numbers. So I could say, I could have this equal to 2. And you can do a lot to these variables while they're in number form. You can say if we wanted to add on to this variable, which is saying line to say is equal to 2. Actually, before I get into that, we can change this print so it doesn't say hello and it says line to say. So this means when the function reads this, instead of saying hello, it's going to say what line to say is equal to, which in this case is the number 2. So the screen is just going to print the number 2 to the screen. We can also set it equal to a string, and a string you define by quotation marks. this actually already is a string. So that things in quotation marks are generally strings. So we could give it a string like, how's it going? And make sure to put a semicolon actually, because this is the end of a line. And now this is going to print how's it going. It's not going to print the quotation marks, because that's just there to define that it's a string. But it will print the line how's it going. So let's see. You can also set a variable to a number, say melons. Melons equals 2. So this variable melons is equal to 2, and we can manipulate that number a bit. If we do melons plus plus, that will add 1 to the variable. So that will mean melons equals 3. If we do melons minus minus, it subtracts 1 to it. So that means melons is 2 again. You can also add on specific amounts if you do plus equals and then the amount you want to add. So we can do plus equals 5. Then it would become 2 plus 5 or 7. Same for subtracting. You can do minus equals 5. Melons is back to 2. There's also multiplication. If you use this symbol times 5. And melons divide by 5. So all these operations are going to cancel out each other, right? Because I add 1, subtract 1, add 5, subtract 5 times 5, divide by 5. And then if we wanted to, this print can print the variable melons, which in this case is just going to print the line or the number it is equal to. So if we actually want to like show change, this will print the number 3. Let's go and see what this looks like in game. Okay, so here we are in game. It says all players are connected, followed by how's it going, and it should say the melons, which is 3, and then end of main function. So that all works out just as it should. It said all players are connected, waited 5, jumps to say hello, and then it says the line to say, which in this case is how's it going, waits 10 seconds. It defined the variable melons, added 1 to it, and then it printed that, so it printed the number 3, and then in virtually no time, it said end of main function right after that. So it's all working how it should. Okay, now I'm going to talk about external functions and how to make other scripts. Because although this is a pretty small script and it's a good place to start in your mapname.gsc or whatever, sometimes it's really nice to have our own files where we have our own scripts. And you see this with Treyarch. I mean, they have so many different, if you go to scripts, they have so many different GSCs, CSCs, and GSHs, and we don't want to be limited to one. So I'm going to show you how to make your own GSC and have it work with your map. So if we go to our map folder, ZM tutorial, scripts, ZM, the easiest way to make a new GSC would just be to copy an old one. So If we copy and paste that, let's give it a new name. Let's call it an external script. Can't have any spaces in the name. Okay, so this is just a copy of the old one. Let's just delete all that, start new. So first thing we want to do is we want to make a function, right? We want to put our code somewhere. We're just going to call it function main. Commonly, whenever you start a new script, it's a good idea to call the first function either main or init. At least that's what Treyarch does and what a lot of coders do. So in general, you don't have to by any means. And in fact, you might make some scripts where it doesn't make sense to have a function main or init. But in most cases, you might as well. So we're going to call this function main. We're going to have it do something for the sake of, having purpose. We're going to say external script function main used. Okay, so we have this script, and that's nice and all, but we're going to get an error first off if we try to use this without putting it in our mapname.zone first. So the way we do that is we can go into launcher, right click, and hit edit zone file. You can also get to it by going in your mapname folder, zone source, or not zone source, zone source, yeah, right there. And that's the same thing, your mapname.zone. So as you can see here, we have these things called script parse trees, and this lets launcher know that we're going to be using a script. And it already has the two scripts we start out with parsed because we're using them. So we can just copy this line, script parse tree, and we need to put the file path of the script we want to parse. So in this case, we called it an external script. So now launcher recognizes this script, and we're allowed to use it. But how do we use it? So this is not automatically going to get run, not like this one is, because it comes off of the yourmapname.gsc. So the way we run it is we'll have to call it from another script, in this case this one. So we can call it, let's get rid of this line, and instead let's put a wait. We're going to wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to call this external script. So the way we do that is we write the file name followed by 2 colons, then the function we're calling, in this case function main. And just like you do inside of a function, with external functions you can also thread them and do some other stuff with them that I'll show later. Lastly, we are going to get an error if we try to link like this, and that's because we need to have a using in this script because we're using an external script. So if you were wondering what all this stuff was before, it's saying we're using these scripts in this script. So as you can see, launcher gave us an error. It says unresolved external. And when we get that, that usually means we're missing a using. So we need to put in a using, hashtag using, and then the file path, script cm, and external script. So now we can put this line as many times as we want, and we won't get any errors because we have that using in there. So if we link now, okay, so here we are in all players are connected, followed by how's it going. Next it's going to print the melon number, and then it's going to run the external function 3 times. So it says 3, and then there it is, 3 times. It called it. The computer read this line, so it jumped over to the other script and executed this code. Okay, so that's how you deal with external functions. And you can use this for Treyarch's functions as well. So as I talked about before in the last tutorial, there's a lot of good resources in the share raw scripts ZM folder where Treyarch has all sorts of scripts for their games, for zombies, and we can use these. So if, say, I wanted to call a function that's in the magic box script, I could do that. I could call, I don't know, I probably wouldn't want to call all these. Set treasure chest cost, actually, that's a good one. So I could call that, so long as I have the hashtag using in the script I'm calling it from, and I reference it properly, which is why I want to talk about briefly namespaces. As you can see here, Treyarch likes to do namespaces, and all a namespace is it basically just overrides the name of a script. So for default, the name of the script is just whatever the file name is. So the file name for this is an_external_script. But if we wanted to give it a namespace, we could call it something different. I don't know, the external script. Semicolon. And yeah, now whenever we reference it, we have to use the namespace. So we'd have to say the external script. However, this doesn't change the using. The using still has to be the actual file name. So I mean, you don't have to have a namespace. Frankly, I don't really like the idea of them. It just confuses you because it basically means there's two different things a script is being called, the actual file name and the namespace. And I generally don't recommend using that if it's confusing for you. I'm not even sure exactly why Treyarch uses it, but they do quite a lot, which is why I'm bringing it up. As you can see, the actual name of the script is _ZM_magicbox.gsc, but their namespace doesn't include the underscore, so that's just important to note. If you're going to try to use a Treyarch function, Treyarch code, it probably has a namespace, so you should look for the namespace. And usually it's as simple as the script's name minus the underscore in front of it. But yeah, if you notice you're having an issue with that, make sure to check that the namespace is correct. So I'm going to go back and talk about variables for a moment, because there's more than one type of variable. Technically, you can set a variable on anything. What does that mean? Well, that's kind of a little difficult to explain, but I'll probably go into that more later. But the most common thing to set a variable on is the level. So the way we do that is we type level, and you notice Sublime is going to highlight that in purple because it's special. The level is common across all scripts in the Black Ops 3 GSC, and so we do level, a dot, and then our variable name. So we're going to call it level dot, I don't know, watermelons. I got melons on my mind today. um, and we gotta set it equal just like any variable. Call it 5. So what this means, since we attached the variable watermelons to the level, is we can use it anywhere we want. So previously, this variable melons, it only exists for this function say hello. And furthermore, it only exists after I've defined it. So if I tried to print it up here, that would give an error. If I tried to print it down here, shoot. If I tried to print it down here, just zoomed in, that would give me an error. Even though it's after it's been defined, it would still give me an error because it's not in the same function, and variables have to be in the same function they're being used in, unless they're a level variable. So if I wanted to print level.watermelons, I could print it from up here. So long as it's been defined already, it works. I could not print it here because it hasn't been defined yet. Launcher would throw an error saying undefined variable or something. I can even use it in other scripts if I wanted. That would work. As long as this is being called after it's already been defined, I can use a level variable anywhere. And now, when I first started scripting, I just thought level variables were the greatest. I use them way more than I should, and they may seem appealing to you as well. You might be thinking, wow, I can use them anywhere. Why would I bother using a normal variable? I mean, I'm just limiting myself. But think about it this way. There are tons of variables attached to the level already by Treyarch and Treyarch scripts. You do not want to use a level variable that's already been defined, because then you could cause some serious problems, like because other scripts are using the same level variable, other Treyarch scripts. You don't want to be using that for something else because you might change things and you might screw all sorts of different things up. So in general, you don't want to use level variables if it might conflict with another one that has the same name. In fact, it might be a good idea whenever you do a level variable or level anything to give it like a prefix before you type what it is. I started doing where I type AB before I do whatever it is, so I might call it like AB watermelons. AB's for abnormal. But just so I know that Treyarch code is not going to have something called AB watermelons, and the chance of me accidentally calling something that's already used in Treyarch code is now like significantly lower. So yeah. And in general, if you don't need a level variable, don't use a level variable. And I'm going to show other ways we can use this normal non-level variable. And that is through a little thing called self and then arguments. So, and also return. Actually, I'm going to talk about that first. So we have this function that defines melons. And if we type the word return, it will glow red because it's a special word. And then the variable, semicolon, then that means when we call this function, we're actually going to have to type out some variable. In this case, it can be the same thing, melons. Doesn't have to be the same thing though. and we type melons equals and then the function. So what this means is now when the computer reads this, it's going to jump to this function, do all it says, and then it's going to return the value, in this case 3, because 3 is equal to melons. And then it's going to set this melons. Actually, maybe I should call this something different just so you can understand that it is something different. Apples. And then we'll set apples equal to 3, since that's what melons was set to, and melons was what was returned. So now I could print apples, and it would print the number 3. So that's how we use return. We can also use arguments. So let's create another function. Actually, I think we've I think we've butchered this function a little too much. I don't even know what this one's gonna do though. Say hi. I'm so original. New function. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this function require arguments. And we do this by typing in here an argument. So for example, this function is going to be asking for lemons. So we type lemons. And now when we call this function, we're going to just call it down here, lemons. We got to type, oh wait, function is not called lemons, sorry. The function is called say hi. Actually, I don't like that name. That doesn't even make sense. It's not going to be saying hi. It's going to be, this function is going to be called count lemons. Count lemons. Okay, so when we call our count lemons function, we have to type in, well actually we don't have to, but it's taking something for the first argument and it's going to set that equal to lemons. So in this case we're going to say there's 2 lemons. So now what this is effectively going to do is when we type the variable lemons, it's going to set it equal to whatever we called it as. So in this case we called it 2. So when we print here, this is going to print the number 2 because we called it as 2 in this instance. We can do more than one argument as well. We can also say greeting. And just to show that it doesn't have to be numbers, we can give it a string. In this case, the greeting is going to be, how are you? Give me some lemons. And now we can also have it print the greeting. And that should also work. And note that the order matters. Obviously, it's going to set 2 equal to lemons and the string equal to greeting because that's how it was called, 2, comma, and then the string that is set to greeting. And finally, one last thing we can do is if we type before a function, we can send a variable. So let's take the apples we have actually, so we can actually use those. We type apples before the function. Now in this one, we can utilize self. So if you notice when you type self, it glows purple because it's one of those special words. And all this is apples has been set equal to self in this function. So if I were to print apples, no, not apples, sorry. That's what not to do. If I were to print self, it would print whatever apples is equal to, because it is now become self. And we can use self like any variable. We can keep going. We could thread another function if we wanted. I had to make a new one. We can add to it, it's just another variable. Just because it doesn't have a specific, just because it's glowing purple and it's has to be called the word self doesn't mean it's any different from those other variables. But yeah, I guess let's give this a final compile. I think I've explained just about everything you need to know about functions without explaining if statements or some other things. I suppose one last thing. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, wait. Never mind. You can't use self plus plus. Sorry about that. False information. Fake news. You cannot add to self like that because it's not always going to be a number. If we did want to add on to self like that, though, we could just make ourselves a new variable. You could say oranges equals self, and then we could add on to oranges and print that instead. But yeah, let's give this one last look. Oh man, so many things are going to happen. So many prints are going to go off. And yes, I know for now that these scripts aren't doing anything, right? They're just printing words to the screen, but it's important to understand how we can manipulate code to make these functions. And I know that as a first tutorial, this is going over quite a lot about functions, and you probably won't need to know or use all this stuff. You might not need to. Okay, okay, how's it going? Prints the melons, external script. I believe it called that variable, what was set equal to 5? Was that apples? No, melons. Apples should be equal to 3. And then it called the external script 3 times. Oh, this printed watermelons. Watermelons must have been equal to 5, yeah. So that's why 5 was printed to the screen 3 times. And then it should have printed, hold on. Lemons should have printed, it should print a 2. Count lemons, so it should print 2, and then the greeting, and then apples. But yeah, guys, so that's pretty much all you need to know about functions and a lot of what you need to know about variables. There's more you can do, and I'll talk about them later on. I mean, variables are pretty important in script. But yeah, that should be all you need to know about functions for now. And stay tuned for the next tutorial.